Hi there. Around 5 years ago I started this channel and made quite a few videos regarding playthroughs, source ports, and occasional strange streams.
If it's not D-running, I'm gonna do a funny scream. If I don't hear D-running, I need D-running right now. It's not D-running. Well, I guess I'll have to do a funny scream.
The first video on Doom source ports has gained a lot of attention, but some of its information is now quite outdated. So that's why I wanted to revisit some of these source ports that I covered in the first video, and then some, to show how far we've gone since then. As you may already know, Doom has been ported to all sorts of things, from ATMs, pianos, cars, pregnancy tests, and so on and so forth. But a lot of this was made possible due to the release of the source code in late 1997, the history of which I covered in another video. This pretty much future-proofed Doom for the foreseeable future, with programmers dedicated to running Doom on just about everything, including modern operating systems, of course. These ports of the source code to modern operating systems are therefore called source ports. You could also argue that the console ports in the 90s were technically source ports, but some cases were less technical than others. Now before I go on, let's take a look back at the true vanilla experience, emulated through DOSBOX. As you can now see, we're running Doom at a whopping 320 by 200 at a silky smooth 35 frames per second. You can very easily acquire this version through Steam, GOG, and other such digital retailers. Perhaps you could even acquire a physical copy somehow, for even more authenticity. Your mileage may vary on how much this will work on your operating system. While it's certainly a way to get the original vanilla experience, you may have to fiddle with DOSBOX configuration files in order for it to work properly. The only real alternative to this is running it on actual DOS hardware, perhaps even the hardware the OG Doom was built for, if you have it, and if said hardware still works. Otherwise, you'll probably want to roll with Chocolate Doom. This is probably the closest thing to playing vanilla Doom natively on Windows and other operating systems nowadays. If you happen to own Heretic, Hexen, and even Strife, you can run them with similar chocolate ports as well. There's no need for fiddling around in DOSBox, although you may want to use the included setup executable to reconfigure your controls, MIDI player, and so on and so forth. Just keep in mind that aside from a select few quality of life features, like easily accessible options in the setup executable, this port has pretty much all the warts you'd find in vanilla. Now, those are the primary ways to play Doom, close to how it was in the 90s. I'll be showing you a few official updated ways next. There used to be Doom95. That doesn't run too well on modern operating systems unless you get some unofficial patches for it. This port is more valuable for its historic value nowadays, of which a video by UtterSpartan covered quite well. I recommend you check that video out. Also, to promote Doom95, you got to see Bill Gates in a trench coat with a shotgun.
These games are getting really realistic.
Yeah.
Don't interrupt me.
There are other official ways to play Doom nowadays, and I'll be showing at least 2 of them. Now before I show you the good option, I feel obliged to show you the bad one. Everything I said about the BFG edition ports of classic Doom in the old video still holds up today. I do not recommend that you play this version unless you are dying to get those achievements for beating them. Which I did for some reason. Something I figured out since the making of the first video is why the super shotgun sounds so scuffed. It's because it's trying to play the 22 kHz sounds at 11 kHz. God, this port is bad. And the worst part about it is that this port was the only official way you could play Doom on modern consoles for quite a while. Thankfully, there's been a better way to play since at least 2020, the Unity port. The Doom Classic Unity port is actually an updated version of the port used in the BFG edition, both of which were made by Nerve Software. Now while the version used in the BFG edition is very cursed, this port isn't that bad. Compared to the BFG edition, you can actually customize quite a few things. You can play in widescreen and play in frame rates above 35. You don't have to deal with those goofy randomized pitch sounds if you don't want to, and you can even turn on a crosshair that turns red when the auto-aim locks onto an enemy. Pretty nifty stuff. Regarding medikits, I mentioned this bit in my old video.
Now the developers could have easily skipped through this by making the cross green. That gets the point across better than these ugly pills, if you ask me.
Turns out, they actually added that in this port. Alas, I'd like it if they kept the red cross, but since that violates the Geneva Convention, that's still a no-go. Either way, I like these more than those suppository pills. Oof. This port's not without its flaws though. The movement seems, well, floatier, since strafe running always have you moving at maximum speeds that would otherwise require a technique known as SR50. The port doesn't seem to run past 60 FPS either, at least from my experience, so if you have a high refresh rate monitor, you probably won't get the best out of it with this port. Now even with those problems, it's still not a terrible way to play, compared to the BFG edition at the very least. Not only is it the current official way to play Doom on consoles, it's likely going to be the way that the majority of people that don't watch videos like these will play Doom for the first time. And as you can tell, there were worse ways until recently. So now that I've talked about the official ways to play Doom, alongside the unofficial Chocolate Doom source port, let's cover some more unofficial ways, starting with a direct descendant of Chocolate Doom called Crispy Doom. Crispy Doom is what happens when you take the vanilla essence of Chocolate Doom, double its resolution, uncap its frame rate, and allow for removal of certain limitations it and the vanilla engine had. In my old video, I mentioned one of the few downsides being that you could only play in 4:3 aspect ratio. Nowadays, you can play in widescreen by fiddling around in the crispiness menu. If you find any level packs built for a limit removing source port, then you can play it through Crispy. Of course, there's also Crispy Heretic and Crispy Hexen as well, which have received similar boosts in resolution and frame rate. Hold on. I'll need a drink for this. Вот Русский Doom. Doom по-русски. Но вы уже знали это, да? Этот source port похож на Crispy Doom. Он имеет множество настроек для оптимальной работы и даже поддерживает Heretic и Hexen. Более того, в нем есть дополнительный уровень сложности – Ультра-кошмар. Этот уровень сложности делает демонов быстрее, чем UV-Fast, и они наносят больше урона. Если вы хотите испытать свои силы на этом уровне сложности, попробуйте этот source port. В противном случае вы можете попробовать оригинальный source port, на котором он основан. Before 2022, this was the original Russian Doom. You can probably guess why that changed. The port that now bears that name was given approval by the lead developer of this one. This port seems to have standardized a bit compared to the other one, removing the extra difficulty and even the Russian localization. On the plus side, its options menu seems to be pretty well organized compared to a few contemporaries I'll be covering. It also has true color support, and higher render resolution options too. I appreciate this port, for being the closest way to play vanilla-esque Heretic and Hexen in widescreen with uncapped frame rates for a while, until Crispy and a few other ports added fully functioning support for them. Even now, it's still not a bad way to play some limit-removing Doom, or those two other games for that matter, if you're looking for an alternative to Crispy. There's quite a number of ports that support things beyond limit removing. That's to say, they have the potential to support extra mapping and modding tools. Let's talk about them right now. DSDA-Doom is pretty much the successor to PR-Boom, a port I've covered in a few videos before. It's been upgraded rather extensively since I made the last video about it in the UMAP info fork of PR-Boom, and it features quite a lot of the benefits I mentioned about Crispy Doom, and much more. The render resolution can be the same as your monitor, so you don't have to go full chunky pixels if you don't want to. However, the hardware renderer now looks very close to the software one, thanks to extensive upgrades to its lighting system. It also supports Heretic and Hexen too, and within the same executable nonetheless. Not only that, but it supports level packs and mods designed for Boom, MBF, MBF21, and more. It features a lot of tools for speedrunners too, and is named after the Doom Speed Demos Archive, a website dedicated to maintaining records of Doom speedruns. Whether you want to try out speedrunning, or just want to casually play, this is a solid choice for a source port. There's a similar alternative that's my personal favorite, however. Woof has a lot of features that DSDA-Doom has, aside from a select few tools used for speedrunning. To make up for those missing features, Woof has some fun extra doohickeys for casual players. This is one of the ports to support surround sound via OpenAL. Use this with a high quality sound effects mod like Doom Sound Bulb, and you got yourself a pretty solid way of playing a juiced up version of Doom. In the video I put out a while back specifically covering Woof, I mentioned the resolution being similar to Crispy Doom. Nowadays though, you can render the game at native resolution, and beyond if you want. If you're a more casually inclined player that wants to play levels and mods built for Boom, MBF, MBF21 and such, then this is an excellent port. Heck, you could still use this one for speedrunning too if you want, if set up right. If you want Woof with some extra visual flair, you can even try Nugget Doom. Nugget Doom is a fork of Woof which allows you to try some more visual effects, some of which are from Crispy Doom. Retro's received quite a number of updates from the last time I covered it. For instance, much like Crispy, it also supports widescreen now. While it runs at the same resolutions as Crispy, if you like a few chunky pixels then this shouldn't be too much of a problem. There are a few visual touch-ups too. Shaky explosions, extra jibbing, colored blood, randomly mirrored corpses, stuff like that. A few gameplay changes exist too, like no infinitely tall monsters. You can disable just about all of these if you want. You'll have to fiddle with the console or configuration file in order to do so. Since I last made the first video on source ports, some interesting things were added for Retro. The most important thing for me is that now you can actually see the stats in your automap, with the right console command of course. Another fun and interesting thing is that you can even have the automap run on a separate screen too if you have multiple monitors. I recommend you check out the list of changes and get familiar with some of the console commands if you want to get the best mileage out of this port. What can I say about GZDoom that hasn't been said on YouTube before? Well, I suppose outside the Unity port, it'll likely be the most used source port by regular people who don't watch videos like these. And there's a major reason for this. Modding. GZDoom has two aces up its sleeve, Decorate and ZScript. Both of these tools, especially the latter which is made to replace the former, are very handy for modding, allowing just about every aspect of the game to be modded. Now as wonderfully moddable as GZDoom is, if you mod it a bit too hard, it'll start to chug, no matter what kind of supercomputer you're rocking. It probably isn't your PC, but rather the fact that GZDoom still relies primarily on a single core, as just about all these ports do. It's more obvious on GZDoom however due to that Doom foundation being pushed towards its limit sometimes, as well as some optimizations from the original Doom code being removed, like the block map and the pseudo RNG being replaced by a truer RNG system. There's a lot more things going on under the hood that I can't fully explain, but let's just say that some of its modding tools are both a blessing and a curse. For instance, here's Nuts on GZDoom. And Nuts on DSDA. Well, alternatively, you can try VKDoom, a fork of GZDoom with an upgraded Vulkan renderer. I'll give you no guarantees that it'll be the saver that you're looking for, but it might help with some of the chunkier mods if you can set it up right. Oh, and either way, do get familiar with the setup menu, especially the display options. The default visual settings for GZDoom are quite ugly, especially if you decide to play unmodded Doom with it. Oh, and don't ask the team for simple things like widescreen status bars for Doom, or any other easy to add features put into default GZDoom, or else you'll get a resounding no. Okay, I'll be frank with you. I kinda consider this one to be the Heartland port nowadays. Eternity has a lot of untapped potential with features that Heartland shows off, but not a lot of level packs are made for it. Now, you can play just about most things you could in ports like Retro, Woof, and DSDA, but you'll primarily be using the source port for the exclusive content. Like Heartland. Did I mention I like Heartland? Well, give it a spin yourself and you'll probably see why. Keep your eyes peeled for anything that comes out on this engine too. As few as they are in number, they tend to have some interesting things in them. Not a lot has changed since I last covered this source port. It's got those, interesting 3D models, and that slick menu, but it's still not my personal cup of tea. Now, you can still play unmodded Doom with it, but if you're gonna do that, what's the point with this port? You kinda have to use the 3D models and other special effects if you're gonna play this one. And personally, I'll stick with the less chunky looking ones. I mentioned VKDoom in one of my previous videos. In that one, I noted its historical value with porting Strife, and that it otherwise had some rather Doomsday Engine-esque aesthetics. However, this descendant has given this source port quite a new life, with OpenGL rendering by default, Doom 3S shadow mapping, and some features you'd usually see in ports like GZDoom. This is a nifty port to give a shot. If a mod or level pack recommends this port, as few as they might be in number, give it a spin. In the same video I covered Vavoom, I also mentioned Rege, of which an alternative now exists, Edge Classic. Edge Classic is a more frequently updated successor to the original Edge fork, with some default settings that click better with me. Of course, you'll still primarily play this one for mods though, such as the one I mentioned in one of the old videos, Duke It Out in Doom. Now that I've covered a lot of ports, some old and some new, let's take a look back at the 3 main multiplayer ports. Since I'm not the biggest multiplayer doomer, I'll keep these short and simple. Zandronum is basically what it advertises itself as, multiplayer ZDoom. It might not always be as up-to-date as GZDoom, but its netcode and supports for lots of mods allow for lots of potential multiplayer gameplay fun. You can even get some vanilla-esque experiences out of it on occasion, but you'll very likely be playing some type of mod with this source port. This source port is a nice vanilla-esque alternative to Zandronum. Like Zandronum, it also has ZDoom roots, with this one in particular more specifically having CS Doom roots, a source port I covered in another video a while back. The scope of this port is more vanilla oriented, but it does have some interesting things, like support for up to 255 players. If you manage to be in a server that actually has that many people, just beware of the doors. Also based on CS Doom with an interesting history behind it, ZDaemon is a bit of a wild card. This is the first multiplayer source port that I personally got my hands on, so I have some nostalgia for it. The connectivity feels better from the last time I played. I might have had some bad luck with the servers back then. When playing ZDaemon, however, be aware that you'll probably get either classic Doom style gameplay or something totally off the wall like this. No in between. Yeah, stuff like this is what WADs like Chillax were made for. Alright, so that's just about all the source ports I covered before, and then some. As you can see, some things have changed in the past 5 years, while some have stayed more or less the same. There are quite a few source ports that I didn't mention in this video, but I reckon with this information, you can give them a spin yourself and see if you find one to your liking. My personal go-to nowadays is Woof, but yours might be different. Let me know which source ports you like in the comments below, and allow me to give a special shout out to some very patient supporters, including, but not limited to, Griffin, Beaks Make Me Coom, and Christophine Place. Your support is always appreciated. Here's to 5 years of running this channel on YouTube. Hopefully I'll have a more productive 5 years as well. Thanks for watching. Until next time, I'll see you when I see ya. So, see ya.